Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Hi friends, welcome to Meals to Unalive For, where we talk about a true crime case and make a death row meal from scratch. I'm your host Jody Breton, and if you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe. Today we're talking about a serial killer named Thomas Otis Knight. Thomas was born February 4th, 1951 in Fort Pierce, Florida. He was the second oldest of 9 children and came from a family with a history of mental illness. It was said that his father was a violent alcoholic who regularly beat his children, and Thomas claimed that at one point he watched his father sexually assault one of his sisters, so this was definitely a violent home. When Thomas was 9, he was arrested for multiple thefts, and at age 15, he was sent to state prison on a burglary conviction. By the time he was 19, he was also diagnosed with a paranoid personality disorder. So there was just a lot of abuse, trauma, and mental illness going on in this family. Just a few short years later, at the age of 23, Thomas would go on to commit his most heinous crime. On July 17th, 1974, Sidney Gaines arrived at his place of business and parked his automobile. Mr. Gaines owned the paper bag company, and Thomas Knight was a former employee. Thomas approached him that morning carrying a rifle. He ordered Mr. Gaines to get back into the vehicle and drive to his residence and pick up his wife, Lillian Gaines. Once Miss Gaines was in the vehicle, Thomas ordered Mr. Gaines to drive to his bank in order to obtain $50,000. Mr. Gaines did as he was instructed and entered the bank. While inside, he was able to notify the bank president of the abduction, and the police and FBI were alerted. Mr. Gaines then returned to his wife and the car with the money. Thomas then ordered Miss Gaines to drive the car to an evasive route towards South Dade County. The FBI and local law enforcement were in pursuit and had remained undetected. However, they briefly lost sight of the vehicle. Thomas ordered the couple to stop the vehicle in a remote area. Then he shot both victims in the back of the head at close range. Thomas fled the scene but was apprehended shortly thereafter. He attempted to hide from the police by burying himself in the dirt of a heavily wooded area. Police noticed bloodstains on his pants and discovered the rifle and $50,000 hidden underneath him. While Thomas was arrested, it didn't stop there, unfortunately. On September 19th, 1974, while awaiting his trial, Thomas, along with 10 inmates, escaped from the Dade County Jail. He was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, and extensive manhunt ensued. And while you think that Thomas would maybe lay low and try to keep out of trouble, that's not what happened. He would go on to murder yet another person. Thomas would end up in Cordell, Georgia, and on October 21st, 1974, him and another man entered a liquor store and asked for a bottle. As the clerk retrieved the bottle, he was told to hand over the money. Thomas and the other man then demanded both clerks' wallets and started shooting. Mr. William Culpepper was shot 3 times and was killed. Mr. A.V. Norton was shot twice. Both of them fled, receiving only $641. FBI agents wouldn't catch up to Knight until December 31st, 1974 at New Smyrna Beach. At the time of his arrest, Thomas was in possession of a sawed-off shotgun, a .38 caliber revolver, and a 9mm automatic. All of these weapons were reported stolen from Titusville, Florida. I couldn't find a whole lot of information about the robbery in Georgia, but there was also no trial about it because Georgia decided not to do a trial since he was already receiving the death penalty in Florida. So just to save the state money, I guess that's what they decided, which I don't necessarily disagree with. I understand why they did it. It's just I couldn't find, who was his accomplice or any more information beyond this. This time, Thomas Knight would stay in prison, but that still wasn't the end of his murder spree, unfortunately. Thomas Knight would be sent to the Florida State Prison, where he would be on death row, but again, he still wanted to cause more harm. On October 12th, 1980 at 9:45 a.m., a guard at the Florida State Prison told Thomas that he had a visitor. However, prior to the approval of the visit, he had to shave in compliance with prison regulations. He refused to comply and therefore was denied the visit. So basically, he had a visitor and didn't want to shave off his full beard, so he was denied seeing the visitor. I read in another article that it was his mother, but I couldn't confirm nor deny that, but I think it was. When the guard was exiting, he and another guard overheard Thomas say, "Well, it looks like I have to start sticking people." So clearly, this was a planned action. He wanted revenge for not being able to visit with his mother and being forced to possibly shave his face. Later, Officer Burke was escorting the death row inmate, Thomas, to the showers. When he unlocked Thomas's cell, the subject attacked him with a homemade knife, which in this case was a sharpened spoon. While this was occurring, another officer overheard the screams of Officer Burke and called for help. Within seconds, two other officers were present and observed Officer Burke lying on his back, trying to fend off the subject's blows. Thomas complied with an order to back off and discarded the weapon in the trash container. More than a dozen wounds were inflicted on Officer Burke, with one being a fatal stab wound to the heart. Unfortunately, Officer Burke would pass away from these wounds, and finally, Thomas's era of terror would end. Thomas would again be sentenced to death for this offense on Officer Burke on January 20th, 1983. Thomas did try to take the insanity plea, but numerous healthcare professionals evaluated him and said that while he did have a personality disorder, he was not crazy and he was competent to stand trial. So that's what happened, and that's when he got the death penalty charge again. Before Thomas Knight was executed, he actually converted to Islam and changed his name to Ashkari Abdullah Muhammad. But for the sake of confusion, I'm just going to refer to him as Thomas Knight for this whole episode, just because that's the name that he was born with, and it was pretty much towards the end that he changed his name. On the day of Thomas's execution, Burke's daughter, Caroline Burke, made the quote, "This is where my dad took his last breath. The system has finally worked. I am at peace knowing I don't have to wait any longer. I miss my dad a lot." Caroline was among multiple coworkers and family members who were there to witness the execution. January 8th, 2014 was the day of Thomas's execution. He did visit four of his sisters Monday and earlier Tuesday by a friend. He declined to make any statement before the sentence was carried out. He did not ask for a specific last meal, so he just had what the rest of the inmates typically had that day. Thomas Knight was pronounced dead at 6:45 p.m. Jude Shapiro, the grandson of the Gaineses, made the statement, "It doesn't bring my grandparents back, but it's over. At least in some sense, it allows for us to move forward. I'd like to hope in some fashion this helps other people, that they realize that sooner or later the right thing does happen, but it shouldn't take this long. It shouldn't take 40 years." And that was the story of Thomas Otis Knight. I know that it was a shorter one today, but I still wanted to share it with you all because it was still just a really horrific and interesting story. Since Thomas didn't have a last meal, I went ahead and just created one. This doesn't represent anything. It was just a random meal that I threw together. So I made a key lime pie. I made a fried chicken sandwich with coleslaw, mashed potatoes, some cornbread, and some fried zucchini. So I just felt like that would be a good last meal. I don't know if he would have liked that, but I don't think it really matters at the end of the day. I had never made a key lime pie before, so I mean, that was pretty cool. It was delicious, except I did drop that bowl into the pie. I luckily was able to save it, so that was positive. But anyway, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, if you want to hear more of my content, please like, subscribe, share all of that stuff. I'm on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, all the things, so come find me. Thanks, guys, and I will see you next week.